isn't the equation of a hyperbola something squared over a number minus something squared over a number? So something squared over a number minus something squared over a number equals 1. It's exactly like the equation of an ellipse, except that's a minus, right? Now, let's see what we know in problem A. In problem A, we know that the foci are plus or minus 3, 0. Now, these are focus points, okay? These are the focus points, not the vertices. And we know the length of the transverse axis is 4. Now, what information about my hyperbola does this give me?
The x is first.
The x is going to be first because if these are the foci, don't I open this way? And if the transverse axis is 4, doesn't that mean my vertices are at 2? Does it make sense that 0, 0 is the center here?
Yeah.
So if that's the center, then my thing is opening like this. So in the equation, x is going to go first because it opens that way. My center is 0, 0, so I'm going to go ahead and put the zeros in, but we've discussed this before, you don't have to, right? If it's at 0, it's plain x squared. I know, here's my center, I went back and forth 2, so what does that mean about this number? It's a 4, square root of 4 is 2. That number would tell me how far up and down to go, and I have no idea. Think about this, we've done problems like this before. This is kind of a hard one to start with. I think we can figure it out. I need to figure out that number. I need to know that number.
Use the foci equation.
So put it in my distance equation backwards. This distance right here, center to focus, I know is 3. So if I add my denominators and take the square root, I have to get 3. Does that make sense to you? Problem solved backwards. So 4 plus something has to be 9 if I square both sides, which means that number has to be a 5. That's a tricky one to start with. But draw a picture of everything you have and then let your logic take over. All right, B. The transverse axis endpoints are 2, 3, and 2, negative 1. Now, if those are the transverse axis endpoints, then aren't these the vertices? Isn't that what that means? Those are the vertices? So in terms of my equation, which letter is coming first? Y. Be very careful when you put it in your equation though. Oh wait, I need my center. I don't even have my center. Where do you think my center is? Won't it be
2, 1.
right in the middle of those two? So what is that?
2, 1.
2, 1. You don't need a fancy formula. You have the graph paper. You can get 2, 1. But be careful. The 2 is the x, so it has to go here. X minus 2 and y minus 1. Are you following that? Now, when I graph this thing, I don't have a box and all that stuff, but I know that I counted up and down.
3.
Oh, what?
Up and down 2.
Up and down 2, which means this number is a 4. Now, they added in there, they gave me another piece of information They said the conjugate axis, which would be this one right here, is 6, which means I counted back and forth 3, which means this number must be a 9. Oh my gosh, guys, that's the last time we're gonna flip the page on our notes. I know, it's really kind of sad. It's going too fast. All right, let's see what I know. I know my foci are at -4, 2, so I'm gonna go ahead and graph everything I know, keeping in mind that's a focus, and 2, 2, that's a focus. And the transverse endpoints are -3, 2, and 1, 2. Now, this whole thing, transverse endpoints, isn't that just a fancy way of saying vertices? But the vertices don't go in the equation. The center goes in the equation. So kind of look at your graph and you figure out where your center is. What? -1, 2 is your center. Okay, we're taking very careful notes now. Everybody getting -1, 2 for center? Now, again, that's your X and that's your Y. Oh, the thing opens sideways, so which letter will come first? X. So X plus 1 and Y minus 2. Now, the number that goes under here is associated with how far left and right I went. So I went left and right 2, which means this number is a 4. This problem looks familiar. So this distance right here now is from to my focus, and that distance is 3. So whatever that is, 4 plus n square rooted is 9. We've already, is 3, I mean. We've already done this problem. So n is 5. Does that make sense? I do that too fast? It's exactly like the first one we did. If they give you the focus points, then you're probably gonna have to work this formula backwards. It looks like D is another one like this. So go ahead and plot your points and see if you can figure out which way D opens. Because we really need to know that to write our equation. I think I'm opening up and down, are you?
Yep.
Everybody see that? Up and down? Which means Y is gonna come first in the equation. Now we really need to know what our center is to get this thing going. So can we figure that out? Our center definitely is gonna be in here somewhere. -3, negative what?
5.5.
Negative 5.5. Oh Lord, that's not very pleasant. he's right.
Mhm.
Okay, that means, be careful, x plus 3, y plus 5.5. Now, we are not gonna panic. We are not going to panic. Here's my center. How far up did I go? Give me a decimal. How far up did I go?
3.5.
How far?
3.5.
3.5. 3.5 is 7 halves. Now, when I went up 3 and down 3, that meant there was a 9, right? I squared that. So what's gonna go under here? 49/4, which is whatever decimal that is. And I don't care if you put a decimal, 49/4 is the number down there. I'm gonna stay away from fractions on your test, but we have it. We're smart, we can deal with it. Now, I need that number. I know that if I add those two together, 49/4 plus n, and take the square root, I will get this distance. How far is that distance? 5.5. 5, I went up 5.5 and down 5.5. So that's gonna, 5.5 is 11 halves. I think I'm gonna leave it 11 halves. So if I square both sides, 49/4 plus n is 121/4. That's 11/4, or 11 halves squared. What's 121 minus 49? Is that 72?
Yeah, it should be 18 times 4. Yeah.
And so n is 72/4, which is 18. So the number that goes right here is 18. And again, I'm gonna stay away from that on the test, but all the math is the same, just a little more arithmetic because of the decimals. Okay, 2 more. Hopefully there's no fractions in these, but we'll see. Last 2. The transverse endpoints, am I in the right problem? Yeah, are -2, -1, and 8, -1. Now, if those are the transverse endpoints, then those are the vertices. Remember, the transverse axis joins the vertices. So we got x squared minus y squared. Our center should be in here somewhere, right? Can you figure out where that is? Hopefully it's not a fraction this
3
time.
-1.
What is it?
3 -1.
3 -1. Are we okay with that? 3 -1? Which gets me started on my equation with y, or x minus 3 and y plus 1. Also, how far did I count back and forth there? So this number must be a 25? What else did they tell me? The conjugate endpoints are 3, 3, and 3, -5. Now those aren't part of my picture, but the fact that I counted up to there and down to there, that'll tell me what that number is. So how far up did I count? 4, so this number must be a 16. All right, our last problem from our notes. Try it on your own. See if you can figure out problem F from the information that you've been given. What do we think? Anybody got an idea here? First of all, do I have this opening right? Well, it said opens vertically, right? So that's what that means. Now, since it opens vertically, it means you better have y first. But when you plug in your center, this has to be x plus 2 and y minus 3. Did everybody get those in the right order? You have to be so careful with these equations. X, Y. Okay, now what else did they tell me? They told me the conjugate axis was 10 and the transverse was 6. Doesn't this have to be transverse? So if it's 6, that means I counted up and down 3. Nobody's looking at your graph, so don't worry about it, but you counted up and down 3, which means this number had to be a 9. And then if the conjugate axis was 10, you counted back and forth 5, which means this number had to be a 25. How many got that right? Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. If you didn't get it right, what question do you have? Colleen, you have a question?
No, I prefer the combinations.
Okay. But you understand why they
Yeah.
should be the way they are? All right, so we're all good with that? Perfect. Okay. Let's get out our practice test then. Gave those to you yesterday. Quick comment. What, Eddie? Is it an emergency? All right, hurry up. Quick comment. This first practice test has double the problems that are on the real test. It has 2 of everything instead of 1 of everything. At least in terms of writing the equations, there's 2 of them. And at least the test only has 1. Yeah, the rest of it's okay. All right, but let's go ahead. Let's do practice test 1. Now this is where it all has to come together. Please take very careful notes on your practice test. Don't just write down what I'm saying. You know, your English teachers always say annotate, annotate, annotate. Well, annotate your math notes too. Explain stuff. All right. Write the equation of the circle with a center here and a radius here. You have to remember that a circle is an x squared plus a y squared equal to a number. Do you remember that? This is why we're pulling it all together. That's what the equation of a circle is. It's not a parabola, it's not an ellipse, it's not a hyperbola. This is what a circle looks like. It has two squares but no denominators. Okay? Now, if the center is -4, 2, then this is going to be x plus 4, y minus 2, and then what's this number?
36.
Yes! In the equation, the number is r squared. Some of you missed that on your quiz. In the equation, the number is r squared. Now, the second problem there is exactly the same, except you gotta figure out your own center and radius, because all they give you are the end points of a diameter. So what do we know about the center? It's right in the middle. Right? Now, this one's, if you actually graph this on your graph paper, this one's on the diagonal, so you're not just gonna count like you have with our figures. How do you find a midpoint? How do you find a middle value? Average, add them and divide by 2. You average them, you add them and divide by 2. So what is 2 plus 4 divided by 2? So the middle x is 3. -6 plus 6 is 0, so the middle y is 0. So in terms of our equation, can't write the whole thing, but I can write the first part, x minus 3 squared, and either y squared or y minus 0 squared. What's still missing? The radius, which is right here. Agreed? How do we do that? I use our distance formula. So we subtract the x's. This is old news, guys. Don't look at me like I have high expectations. I don't. This is old. It's on our Algebra 1 proficiency test. It's all the way from Algebra 1. I got the square root of 37 when I did my arithmetic. What number goes here? 37. Because in the equation, guys, is always r squared. So this is your x minus your x, your y minus your y. Square them, add them together, and take the square root. All right, now I got an ellipse. Okay, what does the equation of an ellipse look like? X squared over something plus y squared over something equals what? Righto? All right, what do I know? Oh, I know my center. Is it 4, -1? Which means x minus 4, y plus 1. It is stretched vertically, so I'm just gonna sketch it and remind myself that it's stretched vertically. The major axis, which is the long one, has a length of 16. So what does that mean in terms of counting? I'm going up and down 8, which means under y will be 64. Square root of 64 is 8, right? And then my minor axis, I'm going back and forth 2, which means under x is 4. That okay? Remember, your test is only gonna have one of these on it, one ellipse problem and one circle problem. We're just doing some extra practice here. And you're taking very careful notes on your practice test. Okay, I have another ellipse, so it's x squared over something, y squared over something equals 1. That's what an ellipse looks like. If you forget what an ellipse looks like, you can always turn the page and look at the equations that I wrote. Right, you do it on the test too, look at the equations. All right, what do we know about this one? The end points of the major axis are at 110 and 1, -4. Now those are the end points of the major axis, but I also know the minor axis is -2, 3 and 4, 3. So gosh, I know what my picture looks like. Right? Do you agree with that? Okay, what do I know?
Up and down, 5, up.
So, you have graph paper? Well, you don't actually, do you? Oh, I'm sorry, you have no graph paper. But, if we did have graph paper, could we draw in both axes like that? And where will they cross? Well, at the center, right? Which is gonna be 1, 3. So my center is 1, 3. So x minus 1, y minus 3. Does that make sense to everybody? So that point is right in the middle of everything. Now, my center's at 1, 3, my vertex is up here at 110. How far up do I count to get there? 7? So if I counted up 7, then isn't this number a 49? And then I counted over how many? 3. So this number must be a, right? All right, help me one. We all want to do great on this test. All right, now we got a hyperbola. So it's something squared minus something squared equals 1. That's what a hyperbola looks like. Don't put any letters in that equation until you figure out which way this thing opens. What do I know? It has a center at -1, 6. It opens vertically. Now this is the center. So somewhere up here, if it opens vertically, this is what it looks like, right? And if it opens vertically, that means y is first. So what goes in these parentheses? There's my center, -1, 6. Y minus 6, good, x plus 1, x with x, y with y. The transverse axis is 16. Well, this is the transverse axis. Now, my picture's whopper jawed, but if the whole thing's 16, that means aren't I counting up and down 8? Which means under y has to be a 64. And if the conjugate axis is 12, I'm counting sideways 6,
36.
which means under here is a 36. Okay, one more hyperbola. Something squared minus something squared equals 1. Here we go. Where do I know? Oh, I have all the endpoints of the axes. So the transverse axis is -1, -1, and 3, -1. Now you guys, if that's the transverse axis, don't I look like this? Because the transverse goes through the vertices. And my conjugate axis is 1, 2, and 1, -4. All right, what do we know? We know X is first, because we're opening sideways, right? What else do we know?
Up to.
Can we find our center, guys? What are the coordinates of our center? 1, -1. So X -1, Y +1, is that okay with everyone? Okay, what else do we know? We went 2 left and right, so this is a 4. And we went, I didn't write down those points.
3.
But we went 3 up and down, so this number is a perfect. All right, so tomorrow we'll start there. And figure out when our test is someday next week. Then we'll